Ahoy! It's Captain Donna. People call me that because of the hat. So we're going with it. We're gonna sail away on the smooth seas of Hearthstone, the smooth green liquid goo of the Naxxramas board. This is gonna be the next video in my series on Naxxramas cards, the neutral cards, and how they synergize, how they work with each of the individual class card sets within the game. Are they good? Are they bad? What do they do? That kind of stuff. Today's card is going to be Nerub'ar Weblord. The Nerub'ar Weblord, or the Weblord, or the Nerub'ar Weblord, as some people have been calling him. This is a 2-drop. It's a 1/4, and it has this persistent magic ability that makes all minions' battle cries cost 2 more mana. Well, the minions that have the battle cries cost 2 more mana. That goes for both opponent minions and for your own minions. It's a somewhat popular card. I've seen it not that much in Constructed. I've seen a bunch of it in Arena, actually. There are a couple notable things about this card right now. The first is the stats on it. It's a 2-drop and it's a 1/4. There's only one other card in the game that has those stats, which is a warrior-only card, the Armor Smith. A couple neutral legendaries, Cho and Natpagal, they have the 0/4 body, but at 0, they can't attack, right? This is a 1/4. Now all classes have access to this unique set of stats. You can do some things there. The battle cry mechanic, battle cry mechanic in general is a very, very powerful one in Hearthstone, since there's no way to prevent it. You can't silence a battle cry because it doesn't happen on your turn. It's something that has an immediate impact on the board. It affects the game the instant that the card goes down, right? And that's what makes it very powerful. Battle cries are some of the most powerful abilities in the entire game, in my opinion. And so this card is unique in that it attacks those. I think it's the only card in the game that does that. And there are, there's a lot of stuff that is affected by that. The card, maybe the most obvious use of the card is an anti-zoo card or an anti-aggro card, because a lot of the neutral minions that populate, Shakaden, your aggro mage, your zoo, your rush shaman, rogue, face warrior, that kind of stuff, they're going to have battle cries, right? Talking Shadowed Sun Cleric, talking Abusive Sergeant, Dark Iron Dwarf. Those are all very offense-oriented battle cries. And then your taunt combos too, Sun Fury Protector, Defender of Argus. Those are really big because you can, this screws up Watcher combos big time, and it can screw up, like a Molten Giant, a double Molten combo, that kind of stuff, because it throws the tempo totally off. Maybe the less obvious use of this that I'm not really seeing talked about as much as I thought it would be how it affects Leroy Jenkins, because he has battle cry, right? And pretty significant, because Leroy is a particular card that is used as a win condition for many, many decks. There are a lot of decks that have that reach, they have that finishing potential with some kind of like Leroy combo, the infamous Miracle Rogues, Leroy double Shadow Step, double Cold Blood, 10 damage for 10 mana for 26 damage. This card totally screws it up, because it throws Leroy's casting costs off. This card kind of functions as like a ghetto ice block, right? Like, it's a weird neutral ice block, and that sometimes it'll buy you that one more turn. Leroy Power Overwhelming Faceless in hand lock, 20 damage, that's 10 mana. They can't do it. Might mess up a Leroy Wind Fury, Rockbiter, whatever combo. Alakir double Rockbiter, you can't do that in Shaman. Some Paladin Burst. Anything with... Well, Alakir doesn't have Battle Cry. I meant Leroy, double Rockbiter, Wind Fury, whatever. Anything that has Leroy as its finisher, which is honestly a lot of decks, this card can mess up. And you might think, well, it's 1/4, you're dropping it on turn 10. I mean, what's that really going to do? It might buy you that extra turn. What if that Eviscerate, or that Prepped Eviscerate, or that Auctioneer that was out there, or that one like 4-drop, 4 attack minion that they had on the board, What if that was calculated into them calculating lethal? This card's out there. They got to kill that first. Now they have to do 4 less damage than they thought. Maybe you survive for 1 more turn, right? That could matter a lot in games where you really need to draw that Naxxramas or whatever. So I think there are 3 things that merit discussion on this card, and we'll go through each of the classes and talk about them. We'll talk about the battle cry effects, both in the early game and the late game, and the body itself. So let's go into the classes here, and let me put up a little boom. There you go. Okay, cool. Now the card's up there, so we won't forget what it does. With each class, I'm going to talk about what are the hard setbacks, like what class cards have battle cries that it creates problems with, and then we'll talk about how does it affect early game and the late game, and what does the body do. Okay, Druid. Now you may think it totally screws Druid, right? Because Keeper of the Grove, Druid of the Claw, Ancient Guy, all these things have all these battle cries, but they actually don't have battle cries. They have this ability called Choose One, right? It's not a battle cry. And so that's actually not affected by this card at all. Maybe it should be, but it isn't. So the Druids actually have no minions at all that have battle cries. So the downside of this card, the hard downside of this card, is non-existent for Druids. That's pretty good. Druids, the body, I think, of the card is pretty good for Druid. It's a 1/4, and the Druid, a lot of the strategy with Druid, especially token Druid, is based around putting as many things on the board and having them stick there and getting the most value out of things that you can, so eventually you can roll it into some Savage Roar, Force of Nature combo, or just a Savage Roar combo based on all your tokens and not. Having things that can survive so you can get good buffs out of them is pretty valuable, right? Mark of the Wild Synergize is great because of the stats on this. It's a 1/4. Now we're talking about a 3/6. We're talking about a Fen Creeper on turn 2. Pretty huge, right? Or maybe even Innervate with turn 1. I mean, that's strong. That's stronger than a Taz Dingo. It's durable, so it's more likely to survive for a Power of the Wild play on it if you have it lined up with some Violet Teachers a little later. Mark of Nature, same thing. All their buff cards get down with it. Cenarius is +2/+2 because of the health. It's more likely to stay alive. Well, especially because there's a synergy there with the Druid hero power, right? It's a 1/4. Druid has a lot of ways to protect their early board because they have the 1 damage hero power, they have Wrath, and they have like Keeper of the Grove, which is usually coming down on turn 4 against Zoo, and you get a charge minion on your 5-drop too, plus Starfall wipes, that kind of stuff. So it can be pretty difficult to remove a 1/4 on a Druid. They have tools that can deal with it. I don't think it synergizes that well with your Poison Seeds and your Soul of the Forest, because this isn't a minion that you want to die. If you're playing this minion, you want it to stay alive. There's no death rattle. There's not a benefit to it being dead, unless you need to get it out of the way for, I don't know, some reason. Regarding the early game and the late game, the early game, I think there's actually maybe a little unintuitive synergy with Innervate and with Wild Growth with this card, because a lot of Druid strength, the ramp in Ramp Druid is getting yourself ahead of where you're supposed to be on the mana progression so you can do bigger things. You can pay the mana premium that Druids have on a lot of their minions for the Choose One ability so you can best adjust to what's going on in the game, or you can rush out your big, huge friggin' dudes. So you already have tools with Innervate and Wild Growth to move ahead, and now in the early game, you're slowing your opponent down even more, right? Because you're making their cards, if it's an aggro deck, if it's decks that have early game stuff, they probably do have Battle Cry minions, and you're pushing them further behind while you're getting further ahead. It widens the ramp gap that's there in Druid, and that's I think a pretty decent synergy with some of the typical Druid openers that are there. In late game, Druid is a class that can get armor and it can heal itself. It's a little less vulnerable to the one-turn kill combos than other classes because its typical defense, in addition to the heals and stuff, are taunts, right? It has kind of on-demand taunts, and, you know, it has these guys, it's got these guys, it's got Cenarius' board that can go. It has ways to prevent the damage that's going to be incoming anyway, or at least to try to mitigate it so it's not lethal, combined with the fact that Druid itself is a late game reach class because of Savage Roar Force of Nature combo that you see so much of. So the Weblord, in its late game benefits, I think are pretty minor, but it does have some early game. I think it has actually pretty good early game benefits, and there's no real downsides in Druid, so pretty good. Mess up your Defender Argus, but you know. Alright, I'm making sure that the apartment next door is not burning down. It's not. We can continue with the video. Let's talk about Hunter. Hunter is another class that, from a numerical standpoint, doesn't have that many downsides, right? There's nothing with Battlecry in Hunter except one card, and it's a big one because it's a Houndmaster. You know, this I think is probably a deal breaker that it would never be used in Hunter right here because this card is like critical. You know, all your mid-range Hunter, even aggro Hunters, almost every Hunter has something because this card is so amazing. It's a good minion, plus it gives you the +2/+2, and it combos on all this, you know, on all your beasts, right? AC or the, you know, the hyena to force stuff into it, or the friggin' turtle that's ridiculous. This is a super important card, and it's super important to bring on turn 4 because you're going to be buffing something that's almost dead from earlier, or, you know, Houndmaster Stonetusk Boar turn 5. You got a 4/3 and a 3/3 taunt on the board, or Houndmaster Unleash combos. That's big. Put 2 more mana on this, kills it, I think, because, you know, it removes a lot of the big tempo advantages that come with this. And the card isn't a beast, right? So what's Hunter going to do with it? I mean, all their cards synergize with being beasts, right? That's what you want, is the beast situation. It's not a beast, so not that big of a deal. The body of it alone, it's not a beast, so I just have to you know, analyze the body. Yeah, Hunter has some tools to protect things in the early game, you know, your arcane shots and stuff like that, but the early game, slowing it down for, you know, with the battle cries, slowing down Zoo deck, not that valuable with Hunter. They can mop up with Explosive Trap, they can mop up with multi-shot, and a lot of times you want your opponent to overcommit to the board a little bit so you can pull off Unleash combos. You know, you do the Buzzard, Unleash, draw, 3-card draw on turn 5, and you clear the board off with the Unleash Houndmaster. Stopping minions from getting on the board is not a big deal for Hunter because of the tools that they have, and so I think the early game benefits of the Weblord pretty weak. And the end game benefits are pretty weak too, I think. Hunter's not a class that seems to be really concerned with getting, you know, killed in one turn by a Miracle Rogue or a hand block or something, because they are very strong in those matchups because they're the ultimate late game class and they do it through pressure because of the synergy with their hero power, right? That's what locks them up, so they can just kind of take the game as long as they want and they get stronger and your clock gets lower and lower. Usually you're not going to be alive by the time that you have all your 4 or 5 card combo in your hand because Hunter will kill you, even if you're a Freeze Mage or something. So the end game benefits are pretty limited, I think, on the Weblord here. I think the card absolutely sucks for Hunter. I don't think that there would be any way that they would use it, really, in any type of format. Alright, Mage has a couple Battlecry minions. They have the Kirin Tor Mage, right? Which, this hurts this card. Granted, it's not a very popular card, but it's not, you know, the stats on the Mage are awesome. The secret value is the same, right? That's not affected by the Weblord at all. But Kirin Tor Mage is good because of the 4/3. You drop it on the 3, it's going to be able to trade with most 4-drops, and with Mage Hero ability, it'll even trade with a Yeti or a Senjin or something like that. That's why this card is pretty solid. It coming out as a 5-drop, maybe not a deal breaker, but it's weaker. It's still going to trade with a Drake and a Dark Iron Dwarf, sure, but you know, that's about it for the 4 health minions on the 5-drop. Not a lot of people run an Ancient Brewmaster. Not a lot of people run a Booty Bay Bodyguard. So it hurts this card's strength, I think. Is that it for Battle Cries? Yeah, I don't have Archmage, but he doesn't have Battle Cry. Okay, so that's the downside. Admittedly, it is a downside, not a huge one. The body of the Weblord, its early game impact with Mage. Mage is kind of weak. I think Mage is a little similar to Hunter in that they don't really care if you put out a bunch of minions. They actually sort of want you to. You know, this Mana Worm needs fuel, man. It needs stuff on the board to kill with Arcane Missiles. It needs things to taunt with Mirror Image. Knife Juggler needs Mirror Images to hit stuff. You know, your Mana Worm needs things to Frostbolt that are out there. It wants you to send your minions out, and there's a great synergy with the hero power that's there, right? Because that's one of your main sources of card advantages in Mage, is that you're not spending a card to remove a low health minion or to do a favorable trade a lot of times. And so by not spending a card, you're essentially gaining a card that you would have otherwise played had you been some other type of class. Especially with no life penalty on it, you can use that pretty freely in the opening game. So you want, even an aggro mage, it wants enemy minions to come and hit the board. And so the Weblord's advantage in the early game actually hurts the class. And in the late game, you know, I mean, boom, right there. I have a Weblord. It's called Ice Block, but it's better because it's harder to remove. I mean, this is the strength of the Weblord in the late game is Ice Block, and Mage already has 2 of those. Do they really need 3, 4 Ice Blocks? I don't know, maybe. I mean, sometimes, you ever played Freeze Mage before? Sometimes, man, you know, that second Fireball just does not show up, or Alex Straza is just not around, or you know, you just can't quite get that Pyro off or whatever. So, you know, it's, I don't know. It kind of sucks. I mean, even the early game, it doesn't synergize at all with Blizzard Flame Strike. You want the most minions possible out to drop these cards, because you want to maximize the value you can get out of your freezes and out of your sweeps. So pretty weak for Mage as well. Okay. Paladin. Donna probably likes it for Paladin because of Blessing to Might, Blessing to Kings. Nope, sucks for Paladin. Here's why. The battle cries are just backbreakers in Paladin, right? Argent Protector is probably your best early game card. Shock and Den, one of its key things that it does in the early game to get control of the board is Divine Shield. It is the Protector play where it can trade, stay at full health, stay alive, and get another 2/2 guy that's out there, especially with Sword of Justice combo going, you know. This, I think, screwing up this combo is a deal breaker by itself. You really need this to be a 2-drop because it really is that important. The Peacekeeper is another Battle Cry card. This usually comes out a little later, so maybe it's not as affected because it usually doesn't come on turn 3 because its Battle Cry is not that exciting against low minions. But a lot of times you're using a Peacekeeper for a Kodo combo, right? You Peacekeeper him down to 1, Kodo Stomp minion. That's great. That's already an 8-mana combo. You're going to be turning it into, well, actually an unplayable combo because your Weblord, both of those minions have Battle Cries, right? So you'd be looking at 12 mana to do it. So it removes one of the best combos that Paladin has in, certainly in a control Paladin. That's one of its main sources of removal. And there's another Battle Cry. You get the Guardian of Ancient Kings. This one's kind of the minimal impact. You know, this taking your whole turn as a 9-drop versus a 7-drop. You're usually just making another minion anyway. This is kind of a last bastion or mid-game pressure card because it's like big and it usually buys you another turn of life if you're on the ropes. So that one's not a huge deal. You know, if it didn't have that stupid drawback, then it would be a killer card for Paladin, right? Paladin has all these cards that are based on keeping stuff alive. And that's kind of the key with Paladin is you put out a bunch of minions, Your opponent's not able to kill all of them, and so whatever is left gets Blessing of Might, gets Blessing of Wisdom, gets bopped, gets Protector, you know, gets a Protector play, gets buffed by Sword of Justice, you know, gets Redemption that backs it, you know, on your opponent's turn now since they nerfed it. It could be good. A 1/4 would be really valuable because it would stick around in the early game, which is important, but, you know, this just kills it. You know, and the long game Paladin, trying to, you know, put it out late in like a control Paladin, you're losing one of your best removal combos. And the battle cry mechanic to prevent Leroy from killing you, most control Paladins, most chub Paladins, as Crip calls them, you know, they're going to stay alive through Holy Light. They're going to stay alive through healing, through Holy Light, through Guardian, through... what? Not you. The Lay on Hands there. That's how much I play Paladin. I don't even have a Lay on Hands crafted. You know, those are the ways. They can preserve their life total because they heal the most, maybe second only to Warriors in the entire game, right? Man. Okay, the apartment next to me I think really is on fire, but I mean, it's pretty hot. Okay, I think we're going to risk continuing with the video. So, almost, right? It's almost a real good card for Paladin, but I think it sucks because I think you just can't... It would only be good in aggro Paladin or like a Shakadin or an early game focus thing, and this just crushes it. So, not excited. Let's look at Priest. Alright, Priest has some interesting things. Let's talk about the battle cries first. You got 2/2. You have these two, alright? The Enforcer and the Cabal. Or the Cabal. People say it different ways. The Temple Enforcer, being an 8-drop, isn't the end of the world. It's still one of the stronger minions in the game with the 6/6. It still usually is going to do the same thing that you use it for, which is that you drop it, you get the 3 health on something else, you run that into whatever it is that you're doing, and then, you know, whatever it is you're trading with, and you heal it up for your other mana. Now it just takes 10 mana instead of 8, but you probably weren't doing anything with that 2 mana anyway. So I don't think it hurts this card that much. This card's a monster to drop on turn 6, but it's not the end of the world. The card that I do think it hurts is the Shadow Priest, because this is a mind control card, right? Mind control is one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game, maybe even most powerful ability. From a tempo and from a mana standpoint, it certainly is. By spending mana, you're eliminating a threat on their side, and you're gaining a benefit on your side. It's a 2-card swing for the price of 1, and it's condensed into 1 mana. That's why, you know, that's why this thing is a 6-drop for the stats of a 4-drop with a Yeti, and it's why its MC sort of sucks. It can only grab these little puny dudes. You know, this card already, you're always stressing that this card's not going to be really valuable because there's not going to be that many 2-attack and less minions left on turn 6, you know, kind of the end of, well, the middle of the mid game, right? So this becoming an 8-drop, I think it hurts it a lot. I think it hurts it a lot more than people are willing to accept if they just sort of shrug it off, because, you know, this is already coming pretty much right at the end of its life cycle, and, you know, how much is a Harvest Golem really going to do for you if you steal it on turn 8, right? Well, you could Holy Nova combo and finish it, whatever. It's doing less for you than it would on turn 6. Now, the body of the card, the 1/4, has some pretty interesting stuff with Priest, right? Priest loves them high health minions. The higher health you can, the better, because it gives a higher chance for that card to synergize with its hero power, right? You know, Narshire Cleric's pretty cool because it's high health for a 1-drop. Only the Voidwalker matches it. This has the most health of any 2-drop. Pretty good. Throw a Power Word Shield on it. You're looking at a, you know, on turn 2 with the coin, that's a 2/6 against the Priest. Well, with a Priest behind it, probably going to be around for a while, you know? Yeah, 1 damage isn't that great, but It can matter against Zoo. It's great against Paladin. So, you know, I think it hooks up well with Power Word Shield. I don't know if a priest would invest that into the Weblord over a Northshire Cleric or over a Pyromancer, but maybe. I mean, it's one more early drop play that you can get a lot of value out of. This card, Power Word Shield, is kind of a throwaway draw in the end of the game, but it's an absolute monster card in the early game because 2 health means a lot, especially when you have the Priest Hero Power backing it up. The other card that's cool is Inner Fire, right? I think there's actually, this is probably the card that I think it synergizes the best with in the Priest class, because you're talking about a 4/4, you know, turn 3, 4/4. Millhouse Manastorm himself is a 2-drop 4/4, but he has this monster drawback, right? This is also a 2-drop with, you know, a 2-drop 4/4 with the coin. So it's just a little more expensive than Millhouse, and you get none of the backside of it. So I don't know. That's a pretty solid card for it. You know, your Divine Spirit, Inner Fire combo priests typically are trying to use those cards as their win condition to put them on like a Stranglethorn Tiger or something and kill their opponent the next turn. But, you know, would it be worth investing one to make a 4/4 at the on the second turn of the game? Yeah, maybe against another priest in a mirror. I think definitely it would be. So that's pretty cool. You know, Lightwell, it's got, you know, it's got 4 health, so Lightwell can tick on it and be good. All the healing stuff, pretty solid. You know, in the early game, Priest kind of has a problem with aggro, right? That's where the Pyromancer Power Word Shield combo came from, is because they were just getting run over by aggro decks like Zoo and Hunter and stuff. And it's a good tool for early game. There's no priest minions that have any battle cries that's really going to screw stuff up. You know, you might think the light spawn has a battle cry, but it doesn't. So I think it's good in the early game because it delays things until the later game with priest, which is kind of where you want things to be, so you can bring Valen out and whatever. As far as preventing the one-shot, the Leroy combos, again, Priest is a little similar to Paladin, that it usually protects against those by keeping its life total high. You know, it has cards like Lightwell, but more importantly, it has cards like Holy Fire, right, and Holy Nova. These are cards that you're using to kill stuff and as removal, but they also heal you. Plus, you have your hero power, which is a great use of your spare mana. And, you know, Valen is a pretty early card for a 7-drop that can really, if it sticks, put a lot of healing back in your pocket to raise the life total, you know, when you're 3 turns away from getting killed for a 10-mana combo. So I think the late game battle cry prevention on Leroy is not that great in Priest. They already have pretty good defenses about it, but it has some early game stuff that's good. It's just, you're hurting the mid game here. You know, this is a card you've seen that the Weblord, it's going to be like this with a lot of classes, where it may, you know, where there's a benefit, maybe several benefits, but then there's always some big drawback, and you have to ask yourself, is the drawback really worth, you know, whatever the benefit it's bringing me are. Okay, Rogue. Again, oh, Defias, Ringleader, and SI Agent, they're ruined. No, they have combo. That's not battle cry, so those cards are unaffected. The only rogue card that actually has a battle cry is the Master of Disguise. That's it. Not a super popular rogue card. Maybe it'll be more popular in the future, I don't know, but it does mess this card up if you're using it. It's a good 4-drop. It's not a good 6-drop at all. So I don't know. There's not a downside on the battle cry kind of things. Yeah, Cold Blood, it can buff it. It's got 4 health because of the body, so it's more likely to stick, which means it's more likely to put Cold Blood on to put Cold Blood on it, and it's gonna be able to maybe trade with something and survive, sort of as an alternative Argent Squire Cold Blood, right? Which is the point of that, is you put Cold Blood on it and it kills something and it lives. But I mean, let's cut to the chase about Rogue. There's no way you'd ever run this card in Miracle because it's gonna mess up a Leroy combo, right? You know, maybe in a mirror miracle where you're both kind of jockeying for what's, you know, who's going to draw Leroy first and what's the kill combo. I don't know. I mean, it screws up one of your win conditions. And in the early game, in your aggro rogue type of deck, you know, despite rogue having good early cards for aggro, like the Ringleader and the SI Agent, and Van Cleef to a lesser extent, you're probably going to be using a lot of the same cards that Zoo does. You know, you're going to have Shattered Sun, you're going to have Dark Iron Dwarves, you're going to have Abusive Sergeants, you're going to have the cards that the Weblord screws up. So I don't see it having a place in early game Rogue. I don't see it having a place in late game Rogue, despite it not really having too much conflict with the actual cards themselves. Shaman. Shaman's okay. Battlecry wise, similar to Hunter, there's only one, but it's a big one. It's Fire Elemental, right? Maybe Shaman's best card, maybe the best 6-drop in the entire game, maybe one of the top 5 cards in the entire game. This thing's a monster. I don't think it is a deal breaker just on its own with Fire Elemental, because you can usually, sometimes you'll play Fire Elemental later, right? Like you'll play it, playing on turn 8, turn 10, not a big deal. Maybe that's your lethal. Maybe you're finishing them off with that, or finishing off some big minion and you're going to close the door next turn or something like that. I don't know. You can't Fire Elemental Leroy, that's for sure. But it's really, really powerful on turn 6, but if you had to play it on turn 8, I don't think it would be the end of the world. So it's still a pretty big price tag. But let's look at the other stuff. You know, the body, Shamans are like Paladins, and like they like minions that can stick, that can survive, because it's the same strategy, right? They put a bunch of stuff out there, and you have to deal with all of it, and whatever you don't kill is, you know, will always, that's what gets Rockbiter, that's what gets Wind Fury, that's what gets Flame Tongue Totem next to it. All those cards work great with high health minions. That's what's going to stay around to mop up after a Lightning Storm for that extra 1 point of damage because it rolled a 2 instead of a 3, right? Those cards all work great with your Web Spinner or your Weblord, because you like that high health. You know, you can see Shaman has a lot of that. The Feral Spirits are 2/3 instead of 3/2. The Unbound's 2/4. The Earth Elementals, ridiculous. So yeah, you know, it's another body that's probably going to stick around, so you can Bloodlust on it, and that's a big deal. That is a nice little thing that Shamans can do with higher health minions. You know, putting an Ancestral Healing on it, giving it taunt, a 1/4 taunt. You know, the Gorilla, right, the Silverback, he gets hated on a lot because it's a 3-drop for a 1/4 taunt, right? But if it was a 2-drop, that could mean something else. You're talking about coining that out, right? Coining that out against Zoo or against Aggro Mage, it's not too bad, right? Especially if they, let's say they drop a Leopardon on turn 1, you drop this, next they go face, next turn you hit it, you know, you will kill the Leper Gnome or the Loot Hoarder or whatever with your 1/4, and you heal it up to full. So, you know, now you have a 1/4 taunt and a clear board on turn 2. You know, that's, or turn 3, I guess. So I think that's okay. You know, I don't know how popular that card will become, but something that's there. You know, the early game kind of messing the battle cries up. Shaman usually doesn't run a lot of early game minions that are like that, because they have their totems and they have, you know, they have ways to deal with early game stuff to get into where they're really, really strong, which is your mid-range Shaman, right? Because, you know, look at all this stuff. They got their Shocks, you got Fork, you got Lightning Bolt, Rockbiter, your Stormforge. All this stuff deals with controlling the early game so you can maintain your card advantage by putting your totems out until you get in the mid-game where, you know, your Unbound and these guys are just going to clean up and give you monster advantage. So the early game effects of it are, well, I guess that actually is okay. I just, you know, you can save a lot of your removal for later if you need to, but it also removes from your plate the ability to use Sun Fury Protector, Defender of Argus, you know, which are good cards for Shaman Totems. And it screws up, you know, your best mid-game play, one of them at least, which is dropping the Fire Elemental. Now, I think in the late game, you know, preventing the Leroy combo, I think that is valuable for Shaman because they don't heal, right? They don't have a way to heal at all except Earth and Ring. And they also have a weapon, and sometimes you lose a lot of health with Doomhammer. So I think the ice block effect of it is pretty solid for Shaman because sometimes you need that one extra turn to draw Alakir or to, you know, get your Fire Elemental out or your, you know, some kind of charge minion to finish him off, like an Argent Commander or something. Sometimes you need that one extra turn. Being able to buy you an extra turn, that's pretty good. Shaman's usually going to have a little lower life total. All right, well, Warlock, I mean, Zoo, it sucks, right? I mean, let's look at the battle cries first, okay? And Warlock, Flame Imp, totally ruined. Its whole value is that it's a 1-drop. You know, Succubus, totally ruined. Its whole value is its stats, and that it only costs 2 mana. All Warlock cards, a ton of them, all the demons, all have these really killer stats for low mana, but they have these drawbacks, right? And so this just blows away their mana advantage. Felguard, you know, now it's a 5-drop, sucks. Void Tear is way better as a 3-drop than a 5-drop. You know, Pit Lord is like a card that I didn't think existed, so we won't talk about that. You know, Doomguard, I mean, ruins Doomguard. Sometimes you use Doomguard as your win condition, sure, to top deck it and kill your opponent, but the real value of Doomguard, why it's like the best 5-drop in the game, or maybe second best to Druid of the Claw, is that charge, man. It's a 5 mana for 5/7. You're going to put it down. You're going to kill whatever you want on the board because it can kill anything, and it's going to survive because it has 7 health, right? Dread Infernal, I think that Battle Cry interaction would be kind of minor. Not a super popular card. As an 8-drop, it's still a pretty big creature. It makes Jiraxis totally unplayable, right? He's an 11, so you can't use him. So yeah, the early game in Warlock, you know, no way, because it's Zoo, and you're gonna have all these Battle Cry minions that you don't want to have slowed down. Zoo, you played Zoo, you got to put as much crap out there. It's really hard to remove. You just run your opponent over and they lose the game. So no way in Zoo. The late game lock, you know, your hand lock, looking at the ice block functionality of it. Yeah, they typically don't run any of these minions, right? They don't even run like a Doomguard. And it doesn't affect a lot of the things that Handlock uses for control within the Warlock set. Shadow Bolt, Mortal Coil, not affected by it. Some Handlocks run Voidwalkers just to push the game a little slower. Your Hellfires, your Shadow Flames, all that kind of stuff. Not really a problem within the Warlock set. But realistically, you know, Handlock's using Twilight Drake, that gets hurt by it. They're trying to do Watcher taunts with Sun Fury Protector, that gets hurt by it. And they're trying to burst you with Leroy, and that eliminates one of their win conditions. You know, while it is nice to slow the game down, because Handlock, its biggest weakness is just getting overrun in the beginning of the game. It's not... I can't think it's going to be worth it because it's going to remove too many things from you. Even Earthling Ring Farseer, right, which is a critical Handlock card. So I think the card absolutely is complete trash for Warlock. I don't see it being used in anything. Warrior. Warrior has 2 battle cries, I think, right? You got the Taskmaster and this Weaponsmith. And that's it? Yeah, that's it. So Warrior is a real middle-of-the-road class, I think. Taskmaster is great. It's a big problem against aggro because Taskmaster is an excellent card against Zoo because you usually kill something and put out a minion that can also kill something on a future turn. Arathi is a great mid-range card against aggro because it's a decent body on a 4-drop, plus it gives you the weapon. Moving this to a 6, it's a big hit to this card. 3/3 means a lot less on turn 6. A 2/2 weapon means a lot less on turn 6 too. Taskmaster later, not really as big as a deal because you're using this as an execute trigger a lot of times. Well, with one big exception, which is Taskmaster into Big G, right? That's your 12-point finisher. Can't do it anymore. That's, you know, that's a pretty big hit to the very little reach that Warrior has, especially control. From just like a body standpoint, you know, Warrior likes it, like Priest likes high health. It likes, you know, you got your 1-4, your 2-3s, your 2-4, right? It likes the higher health because it really likes minions that are damaged. It likes when minions are damaged. Why it has Inner Rage, so, you know, and Whirlwind, because you can damage your own minions, so you can draw more on Battle Rage, put the Rampage on it, Commanding Shout to a lesser extent. Get more armor off the Armor Smith, more health, so you can Taskmaster, you can slam your own guys if you need to. There's, you know, you pump up the Frothing Berserker. These are all things that synergize with high health. It also works with Warsong Commander because it can proc with that. There's several cards that it synergizes with in the Warrior set just for its stats alone, right? And, you know, it has its sister card in the Armor Smith here, but the 1-4 early on, pretty good, I think. It's pretty good, especially when you're able to slow your opponent down with the early game battle cry prevention. You know, Aggro Warrior and Control Warrior especially have trouble with the Zoo because, you know, Control Warrior, you got to worry about getting run over before you can stabilize the board and get your defenses up. You know, Aggro Warrior, you want stuff that you're able to do, like your Inner Rage and your good trades off of, and Whirlwind stuff, and have your stuff survive, but their stuff dies, and get some things out of Armor Smith, and, you know, do what you can to try to preserve your life total despite going to face with weapons. So I think it's, from a Warrior synergy standpoint, it's good for both aggro and control, but I mean, you know, that's the thing. That's why it's really middle of the road. You got to give up Taskmaster. You got to give up Arathi Weaponsmith. Those are pretty big things to give up. You really have to think about, you know, what's your deck construction and how good's it going to be. Late game, you know, Leroy combos, that kind of stuff. Warrior's not super vulnerable to them except for Druid, because, I mean, you know, Warrior never loses a Freeze Mage. They don't lose to Miracle that much because they got shield block, they got armor up. I mean, they have the most ceiling out of any class. They can get more than 30 health consistently. That's their main defense. They don't necessarily need to screw a combo up for one more turn, you know. And in Control, you lose your biggest reach. Sum it up, I don't know. It's a hard card to evaluate because it's hard to see what its impact on the board is a lot of times. You know, are they not playing a card on turn 2 because they didn't draw a 2-drop? Or because you're screwing things up with their battle cry? You know, unless you're stream sniping, then you don't really ever know what's in your opponent's hand, and it can be difficult to really gauge how effective this card is being for you. A lot of the classes you see, there's some benefit, but then there's a big downside too. You just have to decide how big of the downside that is. Top tier synergy, I think really it's really only going to be Druid because there's not really any downsides to the class. There's good stuff with it being out there early. You know, Priest is probably, you know, your middle tier is going to be classes that it works well with, but there's some downsides that you may want to think about. So Priest is going to be that. You lose some mid game, but otherwise it's pretty good. Shaman's the same way, the Fire Elemental. I think Warrior's the same way. You know, Rogue's kind of in there. A Rogue and Mage don't really do anything with the card that much. And, you know, I don't really see a use for it coming in any of the decks. And then absolute deal breaker, like there's no way you'd ever play it ever, would be Hunter, Paladin, and Warlock, because the downsides are just way too much for the value, you know, if there's even any value at all in it. Those are my thoughts on the Weblord. We'll do another car real soon. You know, until then, just you know, take it easy, smooth sailing, everybody. See you later.